After a really frustrating week working on this Puma engine, Dave's asked us to make a video on what it is that makes these engines rubbish. The timing chains stretch. Ed?
Yeah, on the Ford Puma engine, same as when they're in the Transits, they recommend not jump starting the vehicle or tow starting them, because as you bump it, it can cause the timing chain to jump, and therefore the vehicle goes out of time and doesn't start. And also, when the oil pressure goes down on the vehicles, they end up stretching, and again, you lose your timing on the vehicle and they don't start.
So I understand on these, the turbo's pretty weak.
Yeah, we have them coming in at 50,000 miles, 40,000 miles, and the turbos are blown on them. It just must just be the quality of the turbos. Same again when they're on the transit vehicles, they weren't known to be very good. So Land Rover, for some reason, still put them in their cars.
And we've seen some examples where the pistons or the heads have cracked. What's going on there?
Yeah, to be fair, I'm not really too up to date on what can cause them. I think there's a load of different variables that can cause them to crack. Being run low on water and therefore overheating, or when people have them mapped and they have them mapped incorrectly, they can put too much fuel in and therefore crack a piston. There's a few variables to why they would crack. And
how severe is that if a vehicle comes in and that has happened?
Well, most cases it sort of writes the vehicle off because they're not worth putting a brand new engine, because really it's complete engine rebuild, or worst case it is scrap the block and you have to buy a new engine to therefore rebuild.
They can't run on red diesel?
No, well, they can. I don't know why Dave would say that. They can.
So Dave tells me that these engines leak. What's leaking and where?
You can end up with oil leaks on the rear mains, oil leaks, the front timing leaks, and then on the very front of the engine there is a plastic cover on the timing case cover, and they always end up leaking, but you've got to remove a really load to just reseal it up. Fuel leaks, because on the top there's all plastic return lines, they end up going brittle and cracking, so if anyone does end up doing stuff on the top, they always end up cracking it slightly and they start leaking diesel.
And whilst you're up on the top of the engine, injector problems?
Yeah, we've been seeing it quite recently that they've been coming in, even at 50,000 miles again, that they're needing complete rebuilds on the injectors, getting recon injectors or new ones, and they're also a bit of a nightmare for coding in. You have to code the injectors in to make them run smooth. And
what do you mean by coding it in?
Well, you can just replace the injector and it will start, but if you want it to run smoothly and be correct, you have to go into the diagnostics and code them in. So each individual injector has their own code, and you have to code it in to make it run properly.
This isn't the only place that this engine is used, so they sound like a Transit?
They sound just like a Transit, you know.
And finally, pretty gutless?
Yeah, they've got no power. Even when they're mapped up, they're still a bit, they're not powerful. And they're just not reliable. Sacrifice.
So all in all, if this engine, as we've said, is pretty rubbish, why has the owner of this one felt the need to lock it?
I think it's more to stop the bonnet getting stolen.
So let me show you, this is an example of why Puma engines are... So this car came to us about a month ago, had a lot of work done. As you can see, it's had the Mahker treatment, the looks, the bells, the lights. Basically, a front end surround kit. The client said, well, it's with us. We came across a couple of problems, things like the intercooler was split on one of the end tanks, so we've given them an AliSport item. We found out that the engine was running badly, so we did a few things where we hear things like rocker cover gasket, seals, etc. Anyway, send the car away, bring it back, and then the client tells me that the car's running really rough, and I'm thinking, what the hell's wrong? Like, I drove this car myself, I did 50 miles before we handed the vehicle back, and it was perfect. I believe his son was driving it for an hour or so, and then had a big problem the following day. So, brought the car back. First diagnosis, we noticed that the rear engine was chuffing. So these are popular for stretching the injector bolts. The injector clamp bolts, they rely on one bolt that clamps two injectors down. Unlike BMW that give you 2 bolts per injector to clamp it down, which makes perfect engineering sense, Ford only gave you 1 bolt across 2 injectors. So 2 bolts holding 4 injectors down, which is another shocking problem. So we changed that, we recut the seats in the bottom of the head so the injectors could sit nicely, got rid of the carbon, etc. and now it doesn't want to run happy. So then we looked at this. This is the VCV valve that lives on the back of the fuel pump. These can go wrong, so we've changed this, went to do a pump learn. It won't let you do a pump learn unless the engine is about 80 degrees. How do you get a poorly running engine to 80 degrees? This is the problem. So this vehicle has done 85,000 miles, and right now we're 2 days in, chasing problems, changing faults. And unfortunately, with electronic engines like this, we have to rely on diagnostics. We've got the latest Autel, and it's telling us that there's an issue with fuel pressure now. So now do we go down the lines of removing the high pressure fuel pump, sending it away to the likes of United Diesel to be tested, rebuilt, calibrated? That'll probably cost us £200–300. So we're 2 days in on labour, probably nearly £1,000 worth of parts down. So let's say the customer's nearly on £2.5 grand, for example.
So what's the solution?
Well, you all know the solution is an M57, a rebuilt M57 that is simple, easy to diagnose. Don't get us wrong, we've had issues with M57s, but the only times you have issues is when things like these sensors play up. But on an M57, you haven't got to preheat an engine and mess about, learn and learn. You literally take the sensor out, put a new one in, should run sweet. So that's my fit an M57 and fit some German engineering instead of that.
So there you go. If you want to know what to do with a rubbish old Puma engine, check out one of our M57 videos.